Welcome into the Stack Shack podcast. My name is Nathaniel. This is episode 2 this week. Talking about Wheel of Time, episodes 6 and 7. We're
Double
talking about every
trouble.
episode of Wheel of Time here on the podcast. Hopefully, you checked out the episode from a little earlier this week on The Witcher Season 2 and our thoughts there. Let's just jump right into this, Gabe. Wheel of Time, we'll go kind of episode by episode because that's kind of how we've been doing it. Episode 6.
Right?
What did you think of episode 6?
It was okay. But yeah. Um these I'm just gonna say I did not care for these two episodes that much.
Mm-hmm.
This 6 was better than 7, I think. I don't even know if that's true. Each had some good moments, and then each had just not good moments.
Yeah.
Um so I'll go some good moments for episode 6.
Yeah, maybe we could talk happy things first.
Yeah. I like the political intrigue going on in the tower between the Ajas.
Yeah.
I think they're setting that up well.
Yeah.
I think I don't know if it's supposed to just be set up at this point, or if they're going somewhere, or if like this is all they're gonna do. But I feel like it was good setup if it's supposed to be set up.
Mm-hmm.
I thought Rat, I can't even talk. Matt, not Rat. Uh, I like how he was cleansed this episode. I think the portrayal of that was pretty good, well done.
Yeah.
I think it was cool seeing how it was like slithering out through the I can't even think of what the type of magic's called.
The weaves.
Through the weave. What's the
Channeling.
the Sadar? The Sadar.
Oh,
Like
I don't remember.
we see the yeah. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I loved seeing Loyal on screen.
Yeah.
Those are the standouts for me this episode.
I think I can agree. I thought it's fun to see the political intrigue. I think that's a strong point. That maybe wasn't quite as obvious in book 1, and as far as I've gotten in book 2. I know it gets much more in depth later, but I think bringing that in a little sooner makes some sense and is cool. I thought the portrayal of the Amelin Seat, I think the actress who's playing her, is doing a great job of being that kind of imposing figure, and I think the way they did that scene of like her being shown on screen was particularly good. You could tell like she felt like the Amelin Seat to be in that scene.
Yeah.
Matt, the cleansing of Matt, I think fit well, although some of the changes they've made to how that works, because in the show they take the dagger away, like it's gone.
Yeah.
Which is incredibly problematic. And that brings me to my first huge frustration with episode 6. As a disclaimer, I also did not like 6 and 7. I think I liked 7 a little bit better than 6. 6 is definitely my least favorite episode of the season, and made me more frustrated than any episode of television I think has in a very long time. Because I think the biggest thing with the show as a whole is there's nothing really wrong with the acting. There's not even really anything wrong with like the dialogue or the character moments or the like that, but it just feels like it was terribly executed throughout. It just doesn't work. But let's talk. If you get rid of Matt's dagger, which if confirmed, they did take the dagger away from him. Like he doesn't.
Yes. Things can still be done to rectify this, but at the moment it's not very.
But that leads me into Matt not entering the ways.
Yes, I'm so upset.
And that feels to me like they're trying to they're completely changing Matt's story. They got rid of his dagger, so that, spoiler alert, ruins, like, one of the main points of the beginning of book 2. I'm not going to tell you what
Yeah.
it is, because we said we won't dive into things outside of the show too much, but that dagger is very important to Matt. And it's very important to Matt throughout book 1, even after he's cleansed.
Yes. It is a driving factor of his character in the
And
first couple books.
the other thing is, Matt has been the best character throughout. We both talked about how we loved the hinting at stuff with the dagger and him being able to sense the Murdral in the farmer's cabin and saying, I see you, and that whole thing. That was particularly good. And then to just remove the dagger, now I'm like, what the heck? What are we going to do? And then Matt just doesn't go into the ways.
Yeah,
What?
that's why. I'm trying to understand
Why?
what the point of this was.
And you know what? In episode 7, they don't clarify or fix that.
No. No, not at all.
And I wonder if this is part of the we have Matt's actor is changing for season 2. I wonder if that had anything to do with them not having Matt go in the ways. Either was it them changing Matt's character that made the actor who was playing Matt go, I'm out. I can't, no, thank you. Right? Creative differences, I'm not going to do that. Because there were rumors of some creative differences there with that character. So you have that. Or was it that actor's like, and I'm out? And they're like, well, we haven't finished the season yet. We'll just cut Matt from the rest of the season. That'll work, right? So that's a huge complaint for me. Why does he not enter the ways? And this is mostly talking about episode 6, right? But the other thing that I really don't like about something you said was a highlight for you, Loial. Loial's great on screen. I will stand by that and say Loial's great on screen. But this is where we get into this execution side of things. If you have not read the books, why the hell is Loial entering the ways with all of them? Why did he join them?
Yeah.
We've had him on screen for like a few seconds, and all he's done is go find Nynaeve and have a short conversation with Rand. And then randomly Moiraine wants to talk to him. And then he's joining them. And then, he's joining them as they enter the ways.
Now, to be fair, Loial has a better connection in the books, and also just the reason of he's going out to adventure. He's out in the world to adventure. We don't have that character motivation at all right now in the show. Loial has bare bones character development at all, if anything. We don't know why he wants to be here at all.
Don't know why he's here. In the books, know why he goes with them, because they need him to read the way, to navigate the ways. So for those of you that haven't read the books, the reason Loial is coming along is because he's the only one that can navigate the ways. Nobody else knows how. So he can read
lost language.
The language, and he can navigate the ways safely. But that is not explained at all in the show.
I mean, we have the moment where they're like, "Can you read it?" And he's like, "It's gonna take a bit."
So but that's in episode 7. We know that
he's the only one who can. Yeah.
And they enter the ways in episode 6. Later. So, like, yes, you eventually get to the point where, like, oh, he can read. But they don't make it clear that he's the only one that can do it.
No.
And
or
so
even
it's...
I have many problems.
Go.
No, just continue. I will...
you will simmer?
Frustrated to think
you will
about
simmer?
It. Yeah, I'm going to simmer for a little bit.
Okay. So, that's a huge issue to me. That's just a blatant whoops. We didn't explain that at all. That makes no sense. And like we talked about earlier on The Witcher, how yes, The Witcher made some changes, and you know what? Those fans of the book can be total. You are valid in your frustrations if you're like,
Yeah,
I liked how they did it in the book better. I don't
yeah.
like that they made these
Specifically
changes.
Eskel. I know Eskel
Eskel,
was a big feature
that's a big
that people
one.
were upset about.
Yep.
But you knew
But
going in.
you knew going in there was good expectations set of like we're telling a totally different story, and this has also been consistent with Witcher adaptations in the past into the video games and things. Big changes.
Yep.
But more specifically and more importantly, as a not someone who's read the books, The Witcher season 2 with those changes still made sense to me. It
Yeah.
still felt like a good story on its own, regardless of if it was not even based on books. I would have still enjoyed that. Right
Just
now,
the
with that kind of a problem with Loyal and with Matt and with some of these other changes, the Wheel of Time is just this show as a standalone show has not been effective at telling its story, whatever it is. And we as book readers have been trying to be like, okay, well, I guess they're going to go this way, or I guess they're going to try and go this way. And they're just not doing anything. And that's my biggest concern with the Wheel of Time right now. Is you've made a bunch of changes to the point where you've alienated a lot of your fan base. You've alienated the group of fans that are like, it needs to be exactly like the books, which I am not one of those. I am not I understand. You adapt things, you're gonna change things. I'm excited to see changes and a somewhat new take on the story. Cool. I'm
yeah.
so here
That's to
for
be
it.
expected.
But the story you're telling at this point doesn't even make sense on its own. And now you've alienated your diehard, it has to be the book fans. You've confused all of your I had never read the books, but I saw a fantasy show and thought I'd give this a try. Sure, why not? And now it just doesn't feel like a well put together show. It just doesn't feel like a well put together show.
Yeah, totally agree. Um, I have more complaints with that for episode 7 as well.
Mm.
But just a structural issue. That I don't even know about structure. Just the groundworks did not feel done. It's like if you're thinking about the story as a house, we've laid the foundation. We started with the structure. About halfway through doing this structure, we're like, let's add an extension. But we haven't added. We don't have the foundation for this new wing you want to add, and
Yeah.
so it's just feels so shoddy at times.
Yeah. And we like started on the kitchen, but then we're like, oh, wait, hold on. I want a bedroom first. Now I'm going to go work on the bedroom.
And then the
And
problem is a lot of these feel like that bedroom, that kitchen. Those could be so nice if you
yes.
fleshed it out, if you did the detail, if you came back to it.
Yep.
But and I understand book 1 of Wheel of Time very much is let's lay the groundworks for basically the whole world. But while doing that, it added all these good moments that it still felt pretty good.
Yeah.
The show's not doing that.
Nope.
It's like they're throwing groundwork all over the place. It's like they're just throwing at a map and they're like, "Oh, we're going to talk about this place now."
Yeah.
And then we did that, so we've accomplished this scene that was in the book, so we can move on and do our own thing with the character now that was not part of the book.
Yeah. Like it's a checklist. Like, oh, okay, we had a scene where this happened, and a scene where this happened, and a scene where this happened, but we're not telling a good
the order's
cohesive
different.
story.
Yes. And we talked about this before. We totally understand. There are adaptations have to inherently change things. That's what makes it an adaptation. You're going from one medium to another, things have to change. Especially if you're condensing a story into a shorter amount of time, essentially.
Yep.
Completely understand that.
Mm-hmm.
And while we haven't always agreed with every change so far, we can, for the most part, say, we can see why this is different.
Yeah.
We can say, I'm gonna not bring up Elias, but like we can see why we skipped Camelin. We
Camelin.
can see
Yep.
why. Oh, let's not do. I can't even remember the town where they originally meet Min.
Oh,
In the
uh-huh.
books.
Barlon, I think, right?
Fairlawn, yeah.
Yeah.
We can see why we kind of gloss over that, or Whitebridge.
Or why we met Tom later at a different point.
Yeah, yeah. We can totally justify those changes with, hey, we're condensing a bit, we're hitting this character moment that's important, and it's still happening.
Yeah.
With episode 6, I feel like there's a lot of changes that just don't make sense. And I think with 5 too, where we had the whole, we're saving time, why do we have this funeral scene?
Yes.
I feel like some of these moments in episode 6 just stretched on too long.
It was boring.
Especially in the White Tower, I would say. There are a lot of scenes that are like, okay, we're hitting this political weight, and that stare has stretched to a bit too much.
Yeah.
It seems like it's lingering, and it's not hitting the same impact.
Oh.
I don't know. Episode 6 and 7 had the most egregious, we're changing things, and I have no idea why.
Yeah, I can't figure out why. I don't have an explanation, and you're kind of losing ground on the explanations I had for other changes you made. Like, now you're not making sense for that.
Yeah.
One thing. Oh, go ahead.
Big frustration with episode 6 for me. I understand we've aged up the cast.
Yeah.
I understand we can totally have these scenes. Okay, that's on, like, we can justify it one way or the other. I'm okay with having said, like, these people are having intercourse with each other. Whatever. It's not physically on screen.
Yeah.
I don't want that to be the emotional resolution for character arguments all the time, though. There were three scenes in this episode, at least implied.
I think maybe, yeah, maybe.
Or no, the 2 in this episode, 1 in episode 7.
7, yes. I think so.
I just did not like that as the, oh, everything's better, so we're banging now. It just that just seems like lazy writing. If you're trying to do a relationship, there should be, I don't know.
And relationships have been one of the stronger points, in my opinion. Like, I've actually enjoyed that they aged up the cast, and we didn't have all these, like, the childish nature of some of the relationships in book 1 drove me, it just made me annoyed. It was like, okay, the first time it was kind of funny. The first time it was kind of funny. And then the, like, 10th time we've had the same awkward interaction. Come on.
Yeah.
Like, how many times were there in book 1 where it's like Perrin's thinking, I wish Rand was here, and Rand's thinking, I wish Perrin was here. He'd know how to talk to girls, right? That line, in the books, happens like 5 times in the book 1. It just keeps happening over and over. I'm like, okay, I get it. You're awkward, and you think the other guy's better at it. I understand. This is our only comic relief right now, is repeating this line over and over again.
Yeah. And it continues in the books, I'm just letting you know.
Yeah.
It's like book 10, these characters haven't seen each other for over a year at this point, and they're kind of like, God, I'm so bad at talking to women. Where's Perrin when you need him? He knows how to do this. And I think it ages better as it goes, because now you have these characters. But yeah, I understand. And I think it's evident in how aging up the cast has helped. Because even if we thought the Tinkers were kind of a boring part of the show in this season, it felt a lot less awkward not having that that subplot of Aram, I think, the Tinker's son, and flirting with Egwene as much, at least. It was much more. We
lowered that down. It felt a little more natural. It was like so overt in the book. And so I think that's been something they've done well. But like you said, now all of a sudden we're like, and we're just going to resolve everything with a sex scene. Let's just do that. And it does. It feels lazy.
I'm not saying you can't have that. It just feels like it hasn't been earned for, like, especially Rand and Egwene. Yes, we started with that, but it didn't feel like...
And I was actually okay with it at the beginning. Like, let's set up this. All right, we don't really know much about the characters, but at this point, we've been with these characters a lot, and we're just gonna resolve everything real quick with an implied sex scene. Okay, Great, because that
and then
just
everything's
solves all
good
the
between them at
problems.
this point.
Yep,
Yeah.
all hunky dory now.
And
Pain
I
and
didn't
misery.
mind. I think that was the biggest one for me. I think Nynaeve and Lon. I think
Land.
they're okay. Um, in the books, their relationship goes on a bit like it takes a bit longer, to develop. So,
Yeah.
hey, you're condensing it. Oh well.
Yeah.
And then the
And I've
Moraine and I
Swansa,
can't even think.
right?
Yeah.
Or is it
Via Merlin seat. I
Yeah,
don't remember
I
how
think
to
it's
say her name.
Swansa. I think it's Swansa is how they said it.
It's very, very confusing. Especially someone who read it instead of listened to the book. I'm
Yeah,
sitting here like, that's a weird name.
that's
Just
not
skip over
how
that
I
in my head.
pronounce. Yeah,
Um,
you just like that one that has these letters. Like you kind of do that
Yeah.
when you're reading it.
That didn't bother me. In the prequel book, they definitely mention how a lot of the girls in the White Tower become pillow friends. They're
Yeah,
very lonely.
yeah,
That didn't bother me as much. It wasn't needed, in my opinion, but oh well.
yeah. I think that was a one that was a bit controversial, just because people that, at least for me, especially, because I haven't read the prequel, and so
Mhm.
their relationship, how it's portrayed in book one, it definitely never felt like the way it was portrayed in the show.
Okay.
But then I went and I was like, okay, well, maybe it's just because I only have the context of this one interaction that they have actually in book two. They have one
Yes.
short interact, or they have one interaction in book two, which is where you finally get to see them meet. And I was like, I didn't really see the relationship dynamic that they showed in the show. But then I went and read. So I just kind of looked it up. I was like, okay, other people that have actually read all of this, is this accurate? And the general gist that I got is, like you said, in the prequel, it talks about them being pillow friends, and then Robert Jordan, when asked about it, was like, "Oh no, that's yes, I'm using that as a euphemism. Like, it's more than that."
It's very evident in his opinion.
Exactly, it's very evident in his opinion. So for that, I was like, at first, I was like, "Whoa, this is not the relationship I
That's a
remember reading in
turn,
book
yeah.
two." But then when I read, I was like, okay, as long as it's in the source material, I can accept it.
Yeah.
It didn't feel that like it was that kind of a relationship in reading book two, but if it does later on and in the prequels, then okay, that's fine. We're speeding up that process. We're just getting right down to it. And so then I was acceptable of that. But let's talk about my biggest pet peeve. I promised I would go off on this in the Witcher episode.
Let's hear it. Yep.
Unnecessary nudity. Wheel of Time has now done it twice. And the first one was Lan's butt. We saw Lan's butt getting into a bath in episode 1, actually, I think. And I wrote that one off as, hey, we're just warning all of the parents out there that, hey, this is a show that's TVMA, and when we get to more adult relationships later on, we may have some sex scenes that you're going to want to cover your children's eyes for. That's how I wrote off the random, seemingly random nudity in episode 1. We've now had multiple quote-unquote sex scenes, or implied sex scenes, and we've kept those pretty PG-13, all things considered, which I've actually appreciated, because I think unnecessarily dragging those kinds of scenes out, although we also have our complaints of now they're just like randomly throwing them in, it feels like, just to resolve our conflicts instead of actually doing it with character development, right? So those are some other complaints, but I've appreciated, okay, you know, we're gonna do an implied sex scene here, ta-da, let's move on. The unnecessary nudity of doing that conversation between Moraine and like the head of her Aja in the baths makes absolutely no sense. It could have easily been done without any nudity. And that frustrates me beyond measure. We don't need it. It didn't do anything to the story. It wasn't some sort of artistic expression. It was just put in there so that it had it. It feels like it was just forced to be edgy. I don't understand. And that is just another thing on this mountain of frustrations of just poorly executed that I'm coming to with Wheel of Time. It's just poorly executed. They're forcing things. It feels like we're just throwing stuff in there to try and keep people's attention at this point. And that really, really, really frustrates me.
It's very frustrating. Let alone all the other changes that they're making that we can't understand.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think there's more in episode 7 that we have to talk about too.
Yeah, let's talk episode 7. Let's keep this rolling. Episode 7.
Okay, well, actually, let's just do a rating for both at the end.
Yeah,
that makes more sense.
Yeah. We'll just rate them both at the same time as really low.
Yeah. So, with episode 7, I mentioned I had some problems that I wanted to get into.
Yeah.
This one is just from how we're setting it up. Like, okay, this is a structural issue for me, and I would say partly writing issue.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll just say all writing. It's not the dialogue specifically, but just how they're setting up the story and events.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We've already changed the perspective of the Wheel of Time season 1.
Yeah.
Or from book 1. Instead of being on these characters to Moraine and how we're trying to figure out who the dragon is.
Yes.
Okay. We have confirmation this episode, right?
Uh-huh.
This is great. We know Rand is it. Our problems of it being Egwene or Nynaeve, we can forget about that for now. Just add a little bit more
intrigue.
Let's
just ignore it.
Yeah. Why this whole time? Okay. We have had 7 episodes. We've had about 7 hours of content.
Yeah.
Episode 1, towards the end, we get one of you could be the dragon.
Yeah.
And at the very beginning, we have what the dragon did. Someone's the dragon.
Yep.
Cool. 2 moments. We're setting the stage for what we're looking for the next few episodes.
Yep.
Episode 2, a little bit more about the dragon, kind of just a little more for the characters to understand.
Yep.
Okay.
Kind of explain it.
Episode 3, nothing. Not that I can remember, at least.
Oh, really?
With episode 4, we have Matt starting to be a little different.
Also, we have big Logain stuff in episode 4.
Yeah. Also Logain. So we know that there's a potential other dragon that gets dealt with.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just thinking of our main cast characters.
Okay.
Here, right?
Yeah.
If we're just thinking about the 4 at this point who know that they could be the dragon.
Yeah.
We've had the beginning of episode 1 and end of episode 1.
Yep.
We've had just to establish who the dragon is.
Yep.
Episode 2, they kind of learn a bit more of the 4 of them,
mm-hmm.
with Moraine telling them.
Yeah.
Okay. Episode 3, nothing really happens.
Yeah.
Episode 4, even after Shadar Logoth, I don't even series of events are being mixed up for me. But even after they split, Egwene and Perrin never really talk about it.
Nope.
Could one of us be the dragon?
Nope.
Even when there's nothing they're just traveling with the Tinkers.
Yep.
We don't have anything. You kind of forget about it with them.
Mm-hmm.
With Rand and Matt, we kind of have, Matt could be because he might be able to channel and all this stuff. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get nothing again until Matt's secure, and they're like, so it can't be Matt.
Yeah.
Because he can't channel. And then it's just end of episode 6. All right, who's the dragon? I don't know who's the dragon now. And then, end of episode 6, and then into episode 7, we're just now people are starting to think about who the dragon is.
Yeah. Yeah, and in
the middle, why have we not had more moments of just, am I really the dragon? What are those if we're trying to direct the show to be about who is the dragon, why don't we have these characters thinking about if they're the dragon or not?
And why aren't we having more hints of every character? It's really interesting to me because the only character so far that they haven't hinted at could be the dragon was Rand.
Yeah.
Because right, Egwene has that conversation with Moraine pretty early on. Perrin starts getting these wolf powers, and it's like, woo, well, this is different. Like, he definitely has some sort of power, right? Maybe is this part of the one power that's giving him these
Oh,
abilities?
we
Maybe
don't
he's
know yet.
channeling.
Yeah.
I don't know. We have some hints at Matt, maybe. Definitely some hints at Nynaeve. Huh. Let's do process of elimination. Who's the one person that we haven't hinted at? It almost feels incredibly obvious. It has to be Rand, because obviously he's the only one that we haven't talked about potentially being the dragon. And like
and
you
then-
said, we didn't really explore anything about, oh, what are the consequences if I'm the dragon, or what if you're the dragon, or until episode 7, we have an argument, and this consequence of everybody's gonna die who's not the dragon. And then about 15 minutes later, we get confirmation that it's Rand.
And then they give us, oh, you remember all these scenes? We're just going to recontextualize them so you'll understand that, oh, this was actually meant to be that.
Yes.
That to me is not. I understand getting more information and recontextualizes a scene.
Yeah.
I don't like it when it's, oh, this is the scene you saw. Now we're showing you that, oh, there was magic there too. That should have been obvious based off of every other interaction with magic in the show. There should have been magic there.
Yes. Yeah. Like, the only reason we didn't see it is because we just chose not to animate it until now.
Yeah. Yep.
And that makes no sense. You should hint at it in other ways, or flat out just show it in those scenes.
Also, every way we've been shown channeling and making weaves has been, it's either a state of emotion, and then they realize after, hey, I can channel, like Nynaeve.
Yeah.
Or Nynaeve, however you say. I'm still caught up on that. Everyone is taken a force of will and effort and focus.
Yeah.
Or a great emotion that gets it to it.
Yes.
How did Rand not realize this whole time? Yeah, I've been channeling in every single one of those moments.
Yeah, and in the
that
book,
just goes against how we've been shown magic this whole time.
Correct.
Let alone how the book portrays it.
Very true. It makes no, like, everybody else, they were very aware that they used it. Like, either they didn't know they were about to, like, then they use it and are like, wow, I did just channel. Like, that was legit there. Okay. That's how it's been shown. And, like, what, Rand is just now having a moment where he goes, oh, I guess there were weaves around. Like, what the heck? Are you kidding me? So that was just poorly done. And in the books, it is done. The time he channels it beforehand, that he just doesn't really think about it and doesn't realize he channeled, it was in a moment of emotion. Because that's how it's described as the first time anyone channels, is typically in a moment of emotion when they need something to happen more than anything else in their life before that. And that is what happened both of those times that you then see, but it's just unfortunately done and badly set up and executed.
Yeah, I'm totally fine with the shift of direction to who's the dragon.
Yeah.
I may have some problems with including certain people in that, but oh well. I just don't see what was the point in changing that perspective and that focus if you're not going to really do anything to set it up and execute it well.
Yeah, they didn't really do much with it. They're like, no, this is what we're doing, but we're also just not going to talk about it for multiple episodes.
Yeah. If you're going to set up, hey, the dragon is this and there's consequences, why don't we have any of the people thinking about the consequences of that?
Correct. The other thing, you know how great it would have been if they had actually shown Rand weaving in those scenes? Literally do the scenes exactly how you have them done in the flashbacks. You do that, now you've put your audience in a situation of, like, they know, and they're like, whoa, Rand's the dragon. And now they have multiple episodes of, you can play with that as you as an audience know something that the characters don't, right? And that's an effective way to build some intrigue of, like, okay, well, how are they going to find out that Rand's the dragon? Like, I know it's him! You know, you kind of want to shout at your screen. That's a good storytelling, device to give
Yeah,
your
not
audience an angle that the other characters don't know about, and you're like, oh, how are they going to find out? Right? That's an extra level of intrigue that we just didn't get.
yeah,
We were
or
kept
also
in the
just
dark as well.
having Rand notice it.
Yeah.
It would color the interactions where um, Tom is like, "Oh, my nephew used to be able to channel. I understand it with Matt. You can get more of a you could see his reaction, be like, oh, he's not revealing it because he doesn't want anyone else to know as well. You
Yeah.
can see how he's playing with that. Or
Yes.
later on when people were Moraine's healing Matt, you could have had these moments where like, oh, he knows, but he doesn't want to say anything because he still is unsure who to trust.
Yes.
Which in the books is a really big thing. Is
Yep.
Rand has a lot of trust issues
Yep.
as we go further along.
Yep.
So there's just missed opportunities with that. Changing a bit of the what do you call it? The canon that you've established with the show, let alone with the book.
Exactly.
Um,
Which brings up our
just
big
missed moments.
complaint. It's not that it's different from the book. It's not following its own story beats or its own storylines or its own canon, let
Or
alone
doing them
following the
well.
book's canon.
Or doing any of these new ideas well,
Yeah.
in my opinion. Well, okay. Some of them are
Some
all
of
right.
them are okay.
I'm not going to say all of it's bad. There's
Right.
just egregious ones which make it, why would you change it?
Yep.
If you're not going to do it better, what's the point?
Yep. If you're not going to try and improve or at least do something with the change and instead just leave it out there to dry, leave it unfinished, it just doesn't land well. Let's jump to my I have two large complaints about episode 7. One, Lord Agelmar. I don't know your opinion on this, but I felt like Lord Agelmar was completely different portrayal as far as him as a character in the books as he was in the show.
So, not really spoilers, but I don't remember this character very well at all, which means he's probably doesn't show up again until towards the very end of the series, and by that point I'm like, I don't know who you are. So
Gotcha.
I did not remember his how they interacted with him or how that went when I watched this. So I had no strong opinions, but
Okay.
continue.
For me, Lord Agelmar, when you meet, we were both very excited. And if you watched the podcast last week, you saw us all excited about the finally getting to the Borderlands. Okay. And in the books, Lord Agelmar welcomes them with open arms and is so excited to see them. In fact, he's somewhat hopeful that Lan's going to join them because there's this imminent danger of they're all going to the Gap to fight the Trollocs, and they kind of arrive there at the city as everyone's getting prepared to march off to a battle that they're afraid they're probably going to lose. That is totally different in the show. In the show, he comes across as like, what are you doing here? Are you here to try and fix I've got everything under control. It's all fine. You should, it's over-exaggerated. It's all fine. And there's like this extra added conflict between him and Moraine that is...
for no reason.
...completely opposite of what it is in the books. In the books, Moraine and Lan have spent years with Lord Agelmar in that city, spending time with them, and are great friends, and he's so excited to see them and welcome them with open arms. And instead we get this like cold and confrontational argument, essentially. And that really frustrated me because I liked Lord Agelmar as a character. I liked this like we're gonna give it our best shot. I'm not sure if we're gonna win. I think it raised some of the stakes and gave some great motivations in the book. And in the show, it's just not there. And you're like, okay, I
Yeah.
don't I don't get. I mean, whatever. And so that was a big complaint for me. Is I think they just completely changed and somewhat ruined his character. Um,
Well,
which was unfortunate.
as someone who doesn't remember the character very well,
Mm-hmm.
I can talk about the culture of this area and how
True.
this does ruin that in aspects as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in the books, we start learning more about Lan's past, right?
Mm-hmm.
How we even got this in episode 7. He tells Nynaeve, um, he's basically the king without a kingdom, right?
Yep.
He is in the books just a hero to everyone in the Borderlands.
Yes.
Everyone knows him. They'll see him, and like he's got, I forget the distinguishing mark, but everyone knows what Lan looks like.
Yep.
They know, hey, that's our lord. That's our guy who's gonna take back the I can't even remember how to say the kingdom. I think it's Malakir.
Yeah.
Anyway, he's
Malkir.
gonna do that.
Yeah.
We're gonna fight off the blight. He's gonna do everything for us.
Yep.
We'll follow him wherever.
We will follow him to death. And
yeah.
and that's
you can tell us to
talked
go.
about.
We'll do it.
And that's talked about in book 1 even by Lord
Yeah.
Algamar. He's like, "Oh, if you joined us, we would surely get another 5,000 troops to march with us to the gap one last time. They would rally around your flag." Like, that's something that is talked about extensively. And
Yes. And all we get here is Lan telling Nynaeve.
Yep.
Nynaeve.
And like a comment of some of the soldiers, like, welcome Daishan, and like give him a hug. That's it.
Yeah.
And I think it all comes down to Lord Agelmar is our kind of guide to telling that story. He's the one that tells the story in the book. And he's the one that explains why everyone's so excited. Like, he's the one that
makes more sense with Lan's
gives
character
that
too.
exposition as to how awesome Lan is and why everyone's excited to see him and why he's hoping that they'll come. And he wants to be helpful in any way possible. Like, Moraine, he's like, well, you know what? Once she tells him where they need to go, he's like, well, I'll send 1,000. I know we really can't spare them, but I'll send 1,000 troops with you so that you're safe. Like, if yours is the most important, it won't matter what we do at the Gap. We need you to, do your thing.
Yeah.
And she has to be like, no. And he's like, well, at least let me send a small group of my best soldiers. He's trying to aid them in any way he can in the book. And in the show, he's basically just there hindering them and arguing with them and being confrontational.
Again, with the culture. A lot of the books we see, there's a lot of different Borderlands kingdoms, right? A lot of them act a lot like Lord Agelmar does in the books, as just our duty is to keep the Trollocs from getting into the land, and we're going to do that duty.
Yes.
We have the utmost respect for Lan. We have the utmost respect for any Aes Sedai because they help us with this all the time.
Yep.
And then in the show, it's just,
Yeah.
Yep, I don't like you, you're an Aes Sedai. It just goes against what the book establishes with these cultures and what they value. And I distinctly remember in the books when we first get to Shannara, like just how all the Edmund's fielders are thinking like, oh, the culture's so different. Like everyone's more, there's just a different culture to them because everyone's militant because they all have to fight the Trollocs whenever they come.
That's a daily struggle for them.
Yeah. Whereas every other kingdom, they're like, oh, you talked about Trollocs, you're insane.
Yeah.
I didn't get that feeling from this, and especially with Lord Agelmar, where he's so confrontational against them. Maybe confrontational, but not necessarily against them. That's the wrong way to put it. But that's just not how this culture is portrayed, and I think it just this is one of those. What was the point in the change?
Yeah.
Why change this? There just doesn't seem to be a reason.
No, and you didn't do much with it, and it just kind of moves on, and it's frustrating, which leads me into the next problem I have with just how something was portrayed, and that is the blight.
I'm very disappointed with the blight.
You are. Okay, I was wondering if we were on the same page on this. I
The
was very disappointed in the blight.
okay, I'm real quick pulling up the description that they give us in book one.
Okay,
At least I'm on like the Wikipedia, so we
I
have like the
gotcha.
basic description.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the Great Blight, it is rotten and bare land because of the influence of the Dark One. All the earth is turned to dust, and very few flora live here. Um, and then the blight in the show is roots everywhere,
Yeah,
just gnarled roots, like thorny bushes basically of roots.
which is
Why?
completely different. The blight is supposed to be this like barren desert almost, where
Yeah,
just everything has died. And yet,
it's
instead, we do the blight is this really tangled mess of trees, essentially, like stumps and knotty branches.
yeah.
And I have a problem with this for a few reasons. One, a big change from the book that makes no sense as to why you changed it, right? That's again, that didn't speed up our story, that didn't follow along or add anything to what, you know, it doesn't make sense. It also, like, our portrayal of Loyal, right? We said his character design, right? They didn't make him as tall. They changed some things around because they didn't want to CGI the whole thing. Well, the description of the blight in the books is real easy to CGI. In fact, you don't have to CGI it. You just go to somewhere that's barren.
Yeah, just literally go to any of the highlands of Montana and you're good.
You're good.
That's that
And
you have a setting
and
and you're fine.
instead, they decided to CGI this giant blight. So it didn't save them work, right? It didn't save
Or
them
money.
money on CGI. It didn't
It
save
didn't.
them. It doesn't serve any purpose to change it. And my second big complaint, in the books, there's extensive conversation about the warders and the Aes Sedai and the Aiel going into the Blight to fight Trollocs.
Yes. As a
How
rite
the
of passage.
hell are you supposed to fight in that tangled, gnarled mess? You can't. A Trollocs not even gonna fit with how we've portrayed them. You can't have a battle inside of that mess. We can't have combat. We can't have a battle. What are there's we've just I don't know what we're doing with it.
It's just pain. There was no point for it. There's no benefit to do the change. Um, that like yeah, we have some creatures later on. I won't spoil things, but the gnarled look can work if they want to really go in with this one kind of creature that we find there.
Mm.
Like it doesn't have to be desert. That's definitely not desert. There's just little flora and fauna,
True,
right?
true. Good point. Good point.
Um,
Yes.
just to this extent is a lot, and there's again, like we said, no point to this. You're not adding anything. You're just detracting from what the original work had for no benefit
And you've put yourself
that
in
we
a
can see.
position where now you can't have combat inside of the Blight. You can't. I mean,
Yeah.
there's no room. Like they're barely able to walk through it.
Yeah. Well, and then another part. That's, I won't go into too much detail, but the blight is caused because of the Dark One's influence, right?
Yeah.
As the books progress, the Dark One's influence gets more and more, and so we see places start getting less water and it gets
Yeah.
drier more
Mhm.
often, which is just a creeping influence of the Dark One. If this is what the Dark One's influence is, then why are like just everything is getting more and more covered in these gnarled roots, which What that doesn't add anything, in my opinion. It doesn't
Nope.
change.
Mm-mm.
It's just frustrating,
Yeah,
especially since I was so excited to see the Blight, because this is
I
such
was
a
too.
interesting. Because almost every time we see a creepy evil place in fantasy, it's almost always a dark, creepy forest or
Yeah,
cave.
that's true.
Just having it be this, oh, this is a very barren, dry, hot, even though we're far north.
Yeah, like it should
It
be
just
called.
add like, yeah, it's unsettling. It adds a different element to it. It's so unique compared to other like fantasy areas.
Yeah.
And now you're just there's some creepy bushes.
And a lot of them, so much that you can't move around or draw your sword or do anything in it.
Yeah,
Really
I don't
frustrating. I was
see a point.
expecting something more like how Shadow and Bone did their Blight. I was expecting something a little more like that. Um, or I think that it's called the Rift or the
I
Divide or
think it is the
something in
rift.
there.
Yeah,
Yeah, but something like more like
right.
that. Um, and it was so. I'm so disappointed in the Blight, and that was, like you said, that was one of the things I was most looking forward to was the Borderlands meeting Lord Agomar and the Blight, and they've completely, in my opinion,
Yeah,
ruined those 3
two of
points that
our
I was really hoping for.
well then, it's just two of our favorite locations in book one just did not feel the same in the show with the Shader Logoth and
Yeah,
the Blight,
yeah,
which is very disappointing to me in that those two are very iconic in my opinion of just how different they are for fantasy.
yes,
And it didn't feel right
no, and
or
that's
even similar with the Blight here.
exactly, and that's something we're talking about with Wheel of Time. Wheel of Time desperately needs to set itself apart from other fantasy shows, right? And I was thinking about this. When Game of Thrones came out, it was really the only fantasy show.
Yeah,
Uh, Others came along and we got things like Vikings or Black Flag, or, there were other shows that started to kind of get the feel of it, but with like different settings and things. But Game of Thrones, when it came out, it had been a while since we had Lord of the Rings, right? There
yeah,
was there was a
almost
decent
a decade.
there was some time there, and then we jumped into the show, and there weren't other shows competing for that fantasy audience. So it was a unique show, and it did new things that hadn't been done before in fantasy television or fantasy movies. It was very different from Lord of the Rings, right? And so it was able to set itself apart. But it also didn't really have a lot of competition at the time. And so it was able to, just grab that entire fan base, and didn't really have to think about setting itself apart. It did set itself apart, and that's why it was so successful. But it didn't have to actively try and make sure it was, and make an argument of like, no, you need to watch our fantasy show, not those other ones, right?
Yeah,
The Wheel of Time is in a very different space.
there's a lot
One,
more
it's trying to
competition.
follow up a fantasy show like Game of Thrones that was cross-cultural. It wasn't just fantasy fans. So it appealed to mass audiences. But also, it is now having to compete with The Witcher. It's having to compete with high-budget sci-fi shows like Mandalorian, Book of Boba, Marvel, right? It's having to
Yep.
compete with Netflix's even Shadow and Bone, right? In that fantasy space, HBO's coming out with a prequel for Game of Thrones, so it's going to have to compete with that. It's going to have to compete now with the Witcher prequel, Blood Origin. There's a lot of content for our sci-fi fantasy fans. And you desperately need to distinguish yourself. You have to be different than the other shows and have something unique that makes you go, I want to watch Wheel of Time because it really, hits the spot for this style of fantasy or these kinds of things. And Lord of the Rings show's coming, right? That's going to be another big smack in the face to Wheel of
Yep.
Time
Yep.
that they have to compete with. And Wheel of Time, in my opinion, has not been able to, except in one episode, episode 4, the one with Logain. That whole that episode where we on this podcast were like, all right, I think it kind of saved itself with this episode. And then now we've not been able to do anything with that and continue to become more and more kind of by the numbers, worse and worse executed. And like you said, some of the most unique things like Shadar Logoth, the Blight, or I'm calling it the Blight now.
It's the Blight, yeah.
Yeah, the Blight.
In the Eye of the World.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Shadar Logoth and the whatever, I think they just call it the evil. I don't think there's a term for it. Oh no.
Taints or whatever. Anyways,
no, I gotta look it up. Continue.
These different things. Oh yeah, there is a name for it. These unique aspects of the story.
Mashadar.
There you go.
Mashadar. There we
Mashadar.
go. Okay. Yeah.
Yep. These are unique things about Wheel of Time that grab an audience into it. Also, very unique magic system in Wheel of Time. And that's one of the big, and this whole like, whoa, what's an interesting dynamic if we said, hey, there's male and female channelers, but the male side is tainted, and so it makes them go insane. But they're still like a lot more powerful in some ways than the female channelers, and the female channelers need the males Aes Sedai to be able to do stuff. This is an interesting dynamic. What happens, right? That's a unique part of Wheel of Time, and we are just not executing it. Those are the parts we have some of the biggest complaints about. And I think that's super unfortunate. Because Wheel of Time had the potential to distinguish itself. And this is the concern that I had as I was reading reviews of this show going forward. It was constantly getting compared to Game of Thrones. Now, any fantasy show that comes out, probably for the rest of time, will always get compared to Game of Thrones. I get that. Because it's fantasy. Really, every high-end, expensive TV show is getting compared to Game of Thrones. Like, Mandalorian gets compared to Game of Thrones, too.
Just what happens.
But
you have a show that had that much impact in this genre.
Exactly. You know you're going to get compared. But it's been way more prevalent in Wheel of Time, because I feel like Wheel of Time has just tried so hard to be the next Game of Thrones rather than be a good Wheel of Time show. Let's look at The Witcher Season 2. I'm not hearing a lot of comparisons between The Witcher Season 2 and Game of Thrones. Because The Witcher has stuck to what makes our world unique. It's this societal conflict between elves, men, monsters, and these like monster hunters that are inside, as well as some really interesting kind of prophecies and other fantasy tropes. The creatures, the world building, and these ancient conflicts between these different races. That's what makes The Witcher interesting and unique. The fact that the elves taught the first mages how to harness chaos, and then the mages basically killed off all of the elves, right?
Yep.
Those are the unique aspects that make The Witcher interesting and something that we want to watch and
it's
separate
what the show focuses on.
Exactly.
That's what it's going for. It's going for these aspects.
Yep.
Whereas Wheel of Time is taking the things that separate itself from other fantasy, just in the book itself. Mm-hmm. These different aspects, which I'm going to say, book 1 lends itself to a lot of fantasy tropes.
It does.
It's really not as different as, say, the Witcher books are compared to other fantasies.
True.
But when you take the things that really set itself apart in book 1, with like how the dynamic between male and female users of the one power, how warders work.
Yes.
Like, there's these interesting aspects that we don't focus on or we've changed to not be as unique with like the Mashadar and Shadar Logoth.
Yeah.
That really drags down the show, in my opinion,
Mm-hmm.
and really makes it suffer from comparisons more often because you've mitigated all the things that make you more unique.
Exactly. We can't talk about the things that make you unique because you've downplayed all of them. So now all we can talk about is the similarities between the shows. We can just talk
Yeah.
about the Amelin seat and the politics between the different Aja, which is better. The politics are better in Game of Thrones. I'm sorry. They're just
Yeah.
done better.
Well,
And that's a
or
problem.
even one of my favorite things in book 1, we've like Rand has what he calls the void, right? Where
Mm,
he's coming into the void so he can shoot properly. He's getting rid of all his emotions and everything.
yeah.
That plays a big role later on. Things
Mhm.
you find out. We didn't even get to here. I was really thinking episode was that end of episode 6, or was that end of episode 7 or part of anyway? I think it
7,
was
I think.
episode 7. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's shooting it. He's
Yep.
shooting at targets,
Yep.
and you really see him hit the. Oh, I'm hitting the stride. I'm getting all these shots down. We don't get it explained.
No.
Like just that's a very distinct feature Wheel of Time has of how it's describing. I think the biggest compared to other magic systems and other books is that Wheel of Time really makes you feel like you understand how it's being used.
Mhm.
Not just like the oh, this can do this, which means this can happen. It's more
Yeah.
you understand the feel of what it's like to use the magic,
Yeah.
the emotions behind it, the state of mind, and we're
Mhm.
not getting that in the show.
Nope.
It's just those small, not even small, sometimes major things that distinguish Wheel of Time from other fantasy that we're just not getting.
Yep. And that's why I think the show is getting compared to Game of Thrones so often, and that's not a comparison you want, because you know what? The fans of Game of Thrones and fantasy fans in general, if we want to watch Game of Thrones, we're gonna just go watch Game of Thrones. Right? Like, you can go watch it again. There's a lot of Game of Thrones content. Also, if you're really hungry for more, just wait for the prequel to come out.
There's also a Broadway production coming, so
Exactly.
take that too.
There is more Game of Thrones content out there for you if that's what you're looking for. So, if you're going to bring out a new show, you need to bring out something that is unique and interesting and draws in new fans. Or fans of Game of Thrones that are like, oh yeah, I'll watch this because it's a little different. I don't want to see the same show over again. If I want to, I'll just go rewatch Game of Thrones, right? And that's a huge issue. The other thing that we've kind of stopped using is Balsamon.
I'm so mad about that.
The Dark One is such a unique aspect, and the way he's in the dreams and talking to our characters in book 1, super, super cool, super important, and super unique to Wheel of Time. It's like we forgot he exists.
Yeah.
He's just disappeared. We haven't had a dream in like 3 episodes.
4, I think.
Actually,
we didn't have one.
no, 4. You're right. Yeah. Over half the season, and we haven't had a dream in over half the season.
And in Wheel of Time, dreams are very, very important.
Exactly.
As
and unique.
shown later.
And unique to this story. Game of Thrones doesn't have dreams where the Dark One himself is lurking inside of them.
Yeah.
That's not in...
Or, again, we talked about this with the last episode, or I guess that was episode 5. We didn't really get any of Perrin's wolf aspect. Like we see he is connected to the wolves. We see he has some way of communicating with them, but we're not being shown that.
Nope.
We're not getting that unique aspect of he's talking like more through thought, not even like words, but concepts.
Yes, concepts
images.
And emotions. Yes.
Which doesn't necessarily have to be portrayed that way. We talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
But if just showing that there's a difference in how they're doing this would have added a lot to make him more unique.
Mm-hmm.
And also made it more, he's got these really cool powers that we're focusing on a lot. Maybe he's the dragon.
Yes.
Oh, it could have played into how you're... Now, are some of these nitpicky problems? Yes. Are we just being, oh, you could have done this better? Are we acting like the one character in The Witcher that tells Jaskier he's writing these things and it could have been done better? At times.
Yes.
But criticism is warranted, and I'm pretty sure a lot of this is fairly warranted, in my opinion.
Yes. And I think the other thing I'm going to say is um it's like, yes, some of these things are nitpicky, but I think my bigger concern is I keep saying, well, yeah, that's kind of a smaller issue. Like, maybe that's just a smaller issue. Maybe they'll fix this, or they'll do this, or maybe they're moving this way. Oh, that's just kind of a small little issue. Maybe I shouldn't focus on that too much. Well,
But we
when
keep
you
saying
have
that.
a bunch of small problems that are constant all the time, now we have a big problem.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes,
One
some
small
of
cut's
these,
not a problem.
any of these complaints I've had, if it was just one or two of them, it'd probably still be a great show. But
Yeah.
it's the whole of the issues where there are, it's starting to amount to, this is not just a little issue here and a little issue here, or oh, I would have done that a little differently. It is,
Yep.
I'm consistently throughout the episodes going, I would have done that differently. I would have done that differently. I would have done that differently. Oh, that shouldn't be that. Oh, that makes no sense. And
Yes.
that's where we get into, okay, this is a legit problem now.
Yeah. It really. And I think another problem for me, I don't know if it was just how the stakes had to be set up, but I never really felt like each. Maybe this is just because I've read the books, or I'm familiar with what's going on. I have a decent idea of what should be happening.
Yeah.
I never felt like the stakes were always there.
No.
Nothing this season has felt like it's having a lasting impact, or was going to, except for.
No. Not a
I,
lot.
and I don't know if that's just because I've read what's happened. I'm familiar with the work,
Yeah.
or if it was the way the show was set up.
Yeah.
I'm leaning towards it was my just having a previous understanding of what's going on.
I would lean that way as well, and that's something I've been trying to like make sure I take into context. It's like, I know what's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
For example, the whole like who's the dragon thing. Because I've read all of book 1, I knew who the dragon was. I know who it's going to be, and I know what this next episode is going to entail.
Yeah.
But, and so I've tried to give the whole storyline of like, who's the dragon, who's the dragon, I've tried to give that some room to breathe, of like, okay, if I hadn't read the books, that would probably be somewhat compelling to me, right? And try and put myself in that shoes of, okay, well, I can't judge that, and I think we've done a good job of not judging that too hard, because obviously that's not real compelling to us because we know who the dragon is, so we're just kind of like, haha, you think it's that, like, it's not enhancing our experience that much. But I think it would a non-fan. But I think we're coming to the point here where there's also a lot of things that if you have not read the books, you're going to be confused. Like we talked about Loyal on the last part.
Yeah.
Like we talked about Rand using the one power in your own canon of your show, which you've changed kind of how that looks. You've lost, it doesn't, you didn't even follow your own canon that you set up. So if you were coming in from a position where you hadn't seen, or you hadn't read the books, it still wouldn't fit in even your understanding of how the world works and how the magic system works. And that's where I think we start running into problems. Now, we on the podcast, right, we're critics, right, essentially.
Quote unquote.
We are not, we're here because we want to discuss the things we like and don't like about shows.
Yes.
Which, and we try and be fairly fair, and we're just sharing our opinions, right? And obviously, if you said, hey, Nathaniel, I'd like to see you write the Wheel of Time instead. I wouldn't be able to come up with a script, right? I'm not a script writer. That's not something I know how to do. And so there needs to be some understanding of, hey, I don't want to judge too hard because I don't know if I would necessarily do better. But what I think is important is to have some fair criticisms. Like, that's why I'm here. I'm not here to write a better version of Wheel of Time. If I was, I would be writing a better version of Wheel of Time, right?
Yeah.
Instead, I'm here to critique what we're getting. And
Yes.
Wheel of Time, the books, right? I complained about, I don't like how these relationships are working out. I like how it was better portrayed in the show, and I think we tried to be fair. But I'm really at a point here where I am just hoping that this Friday's episode will be just a total knockout. It'll be amazing. And really wrap up and give me some hope for season 2, which we already know is going to be produced because it's already been greenlit.
Yeah. So I believe season 3 was actually as well.
Yeah. So we know we're getting more Wheel of Time. And they are spending so much money on
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, so here's the deal. I want to see this first season of Wheel of Time is doing much worse than even I would say about Witcher season 1. Right? And I think the big thing to point out is Witcher season 1, I had a couple of main problems with it that dropped it to a 6 out of 10 is what I would have rated it.
Yep.
But there wasn't this mass amount of issues that I'm having with Wheel of Time. Wheel of Time has way more issues, and it's when we get to our final ratings, I'm gonna be dropping it even lower because of that. But what I'm hoping for is a great season finale that makes me excited for season 2, and I hope that they
just like Witcher season 1.
Just like Witcher season 1. Now, again, like I said, I liked Witcher season 1 better than I'm liking Wheel of Time season 1 at this point. So they're gonna really need one hell of a season finale.
Yes.
And it's not setting up well because only Moraine and Rand went into the Blight. And they changed the whole Blight. So we're not looking positive here. The Witcher had like a good solid like last 3 episodes. Wheel of Time's banking on 1 solid episode to hopefully set up for season 2, and hopefully they can take some of the feedback and do something really great with season 2. Similar to how the writers of The Witcher did something really amazing with season 2 of The Witcher. They told it in a more palatable storytelling mode, and they focused more on the characters. But I felt like Witcher season 1 had way more foundation of like, okay, these characters were well done in season 1 as well. Right now, Wheel of Time's struggling with that. I'm hoping for a miracle this Friday. I'm concerned we won't get it.
Oh, we'll find out.
We will.
But I think overall, what would you rate 6 and 7? Let's finish on that.
Just I think we've done our 6 and 7 as a pair. I would probably rate a 3 out of 10.
Okay. I was gonna say 4.
Okay.
It's taken all of our problems so far and just reinforced them like, oh, this is still an issue. This is still something that you can't seem to do correctly.
Yeah.
You're still changing things without any need to change them.
Mm-hmm. In fact, that issue of changing things and not making any sense to why they changed them has become more of a problem.
Yes. Which is making me more worried for the following seasons.
Correct.
And even worried for this episode. I don't see how you could change the ending of Eye of the World, because this is basically what episode 8 is going to be.
Yep.
The ending of book 1.
Yep.
I don't see how you could change it too much, but they already have by not having certain characters there, unless they catch up. I don't know. We'll find out.
Well,
But
and
yeah,
that's another
4 out of 10.
interesting thing I just want to touch on real quick. We made a lot of comments early on in the season of them skipping certain things or cutting certain characters out of like, okay, we're trying to speed up so that we can do more than one book in a season. They're still
Yeah.
going to end up only finishing one book this season.
Which I think you kind of have, like, this is if the whole concept of the show is who's the dragon, and now it's coming down to
Yes.
last episode we're proving who the dragon is, that
Yep.
makes sense.
It does.
But I don't feel like we've gained enough ground into other plot lines that have come into book 2 and book 3
Correct.
to warrant having them in the first place.
Yep. And if your whole purpose was, hey, we're skipping some of this stuff so that we can get on with the story, if you still end up at the same ending and without advancing any other aspects of the story, like you still ended up at basically the same spot, maybe even I would argue a little bit behind where book 1 ends, because of
At
how
least
you've
in
changed
terms of characters, yeah.
how you've not introduced certain characters and how you've changed Min's interactions and Elida. We haven't even met Elida. That whole situation, you almost took more time. Wow, I don't know how
Yeah.
they pulled it off. They cut stuff. I guess how they pulled
it's
it
'cause
off
of the
is they
funeral
spent a
scene.
funeral. Yes, that's true. Good. Thank you for reminding me. They spent a half
God.
hour in a funeral. That's why we
Oh.
ended up behind even where book 1 ends. So
Yeah.
let's hope for a big, great finale. Maybe it'll be a longer. I don't know. Did they say how long? Maybe the runtime will be longer and they'll do more stuff with it. I don't know. We'll see. I already know that they are cutting the Green Man, who is a character that you meet at the end of book 1. They already said they're cutting him out of the story.
That's not a big deal to me.
Which isn't a big deal. No, not at all. But
no, we just know they're already changing something.
we already know they're changing that, so don't expect that. I was okay with that change to cut him out.
It's like in Lord of the Rings, you cut out the whole what's his name in the forest
Tom
the hobbits meet.
Bombadil.
Than't you. Yeah, we cut it. Not important. Like, it's nice in the books, but not.
Yeah,
important.
it's cool. There's some good moments, but it's not necessarily important to our overall story, so it made sense to cut him. But now I'm just, we'll see what this last episode is. Maybe they took all their money and saved it throughout the season to dump it into this episode, and it's going to be sick. I hope it is. I hope it gives me some sort of excitement for the next season. But being completely honest, if I was not covering this show on this podcast, I probably would have stopped after episode 6 and just waited for the rest of the episodes to come out and just binged them one random Saturday when I was bored. Like, I've lost basically all interest.
Yeah. I'm kind of at the same boat as someone who's read all the books and loves them dearly. I was expecting to, no matter how different the season was going to be, I was expecting to at least be excited to see my show or my book series like adapted into a new medium, and I'm not as excited about that anymore. Oh God, as someone who has read all the books, it's my favorite book series of all time.
Mm-hmm.
I expected to no matter how different this season was going to be, to at least be excited to see certain moments on screen.
Yeah.
And now I'm not even sure I'm getting the moments I'm excited for.
Yeah.
Like, I understand things are going to change, but the things that I was most excited for in season 1, Shadar Logoth, the Blight, Loyal, the Ways, not many of those were done well, and so I'm not excited to see other scenes on screen. So, yeah, also in the same boat of not excited.
Yeah. We'll just have to see.
Yeah, maybe season 1 goes out on a banger, and season 2 starts off strong. We'll just have to find out.
Let's hope. All right. Well, with that, we're going to end today's episode, the double episode week, because we had a lot of content. We will be back next week to talk Wheel of Time, the season finale, as well as, hopefully we'll be able to revise some of our background, our thoughts and concerns that hopefully will get resolved in the season finale. We'll be watching it and we'll be covering it here on the podcast. We're also getting ready for Book of Boba Fett, so that's going to be lit. And hopefully, if you enjoyed our discussion, let us know what your thoughts are in the comments. Maybe if there's some fans out there that have not read the book but are just fans of the show, maybe me and Gabe are way off here on some of these concerns. Maybe Loyal does make sense to you. So let us know in the comments down below. And as always, like, share, subscribe, and catch us on Twitter. I've been trying to post a little bit more podcast-related content there on the Twitter, so come hang out. Those are all linked down below, and we'll see you next week.